far beyond Salt Lake City, and the benefit, the environmental impacts for sure are going to outlast all of us.
Vicki was extraordinary. She was committed. She was highly competent, very conscientious, and always a real joy to work with. We were always on the same track, and I laid out a very ambitious agenda and was always adding to it. And she never complained. Not only did she not complain, it seemed like she embraced the job with real gusto. And we became the city with the most comprehensive environmental and especially climate protection programs in the country.
She shaped things by being so capable and getting things done as much as anything else. And, you know, as someone in office who was looking to really push the envelope of what we could do in the whole range of sustainability measures.
to today's City Council meeting. We are grateful to have you joining us as we continue to hold electronic meetings. Welcome to the members of the public who may be watching our usual video feeds online. Even though we are not in person, this meeting is still considered an open and public meeting. Today is a work session only to discuss unresolved budget issues. There's no public comment scheduled today. However, Tuesday, June 15th will be the next opportunity for the public to comment during our 7 p.m. formal meeting. Your feedback is always welcome, and you can share with the City Council anytime by mailing us at P.O. Box 145476, Salt Lake City, Utah 84114, or emailing us at council.comments@slcgov.com, or by calling our 24-hour phone comment line at 801-535-7654. With that, we are going to just jump right in. I'm turning the time over to Jennifer Bruno to talk about unresolved issues. So take it away, Jen.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Hopefully the council received the most recent version of this tracking spreadsheet. We've clarified some of the numbers, and so that's why we labeled the 115 version. We'll have that uploaded to the website as well soon. I wanted to I'll share my screen real quickly and highlight just a few of the housekeeping issues that we updated. So feel free to pop in if there's any questions. So the first item we just wanted to clarify is this elections amount. We had plugged in recapturing 183,000 for that, assuming that the state would be helping out with some of the communication and outreach efforts. Those state funds have not come through as expected and on the timeline expected. And so out of an abundance of caution, staff is recommending that you plug $50,000 back into the budget on that line item, just to ensure that there's no delay in communications. If the state funds do end up coming through, the council can always recapture these funds in a budget amendment. So just out of an abundance of caution, that was something we wanted.
Jennifer, does this 133,000? Oh yeah, it does. Never mind.
Yeah.
Question answered by looking at simple math.
Let's see. And then the next item that changed a little bit from the last time we looked at this spreadsheet was the exact amount for the savings from the straw poll on the prosecutor's office. We clarified exactly how much was needed for that reclassification. So that's actually a little bit more than we had plugged in last time. And so now the net is that expenses exceed revenues by $449,111. I'll stop sharing my screen because the other two updates, just housekeeping updates I have, don't necessarily affect balancing, but could be council straw polls. One is the positions that are being transferred, that are proposed to be transferred from a variety of departments into the mayor's office to create a new, Office of Equity in the mayor's office. There are various titles for those positions, and one thing that the mayor's staff is realizing as they're trying to formulate the structure of that Office of Equity is that it might help to have a kind of generic job title for those positions as they get the exact roles kind of figured out. So what they're proposing is to call it a equity team member. Because it's a staffing document change, they kind of need the council's approval to change that title. And then they would request that the council straw poll, if they can advertise before the start of the fiscal year so that they can hire those positions more quickly. So if the council wanted to straw poll that item, that would be helpful for our staff as we put together the adoption documents.
Does everyone understand what, and I'm not going to say Jen's straw poll, I will just reiterate it so it can be my straw poll, but that the mayor's office is asking that we sort of change the title of the equity office members to team members. And then there was a second thing that you said, Jen.
Early advertising.
Oh yeah, and then the July 1. So so that they can advertise and hire as soon as possible. Is there any discussion on that straw poll?
And that doesn't change the 449.
Right. It's not a budget impact. It's a staffing document clarification. And then the early advertising is just so that they know they're not acting out of their scope.
And I'll just add, if you don't mind, that we worked with them to come up with this suggestion because our staff is working as a team with the administration on the equity and policing. And so we're trying everything possible to keep that flowing smoothly and as quickly as possible. So that's how we got here. It's not like they were just asking for a special favor. We were thinking, how could we expedite this work?
Any other questions on that? Okay, show your feelings. I'm going to get a t-shirt that says this. Okay, I'm a yes. Darren's a yes. Dennis is a yes. James is a yes. Dan is a yes. Anna's a yes. Chris is not with us for that, so that passes.
And then the other housekeeping item I wanted to share is the status of property tax information and new growth. Usually by now, by June 8th, we would have the final information from the State Tax Commission. They work with the county assessor and auditor to get that information finalized. As of today, we don't have that information yet. And the information, the preliminary information we do have is actually $1 million less than is in the mayor's recommended budget. Now, that's not something that we expect, especially based on the certificates of occupancy that have actually been issued by the city, which means that literally that is the definition of new growth. The challenge is that there's not exactly an appeal process at the state to appeal new growth determination. Finance has been working with both county staff and staff at the State Tax Commission, and they have a few outstanding questions that they're trying to clarify. And so our staff and finance is hoping that that clarifies that amount in the direction that we need it to go. But we aren't positive where that when that information will be finalized. They tell us tomorrow, but we can't be sure. So usually we would have had that information for you by now so that you could do a once and final balance. And I think later on in the discussion, we may ask you to kind of think about where you might want to balance if you end up having to balance that 449,000. But I just wanted to share kind of the unique status of that property tax information right now. Yes, Councilmember Mono, I think has a question.
So wait, the 449,000 in this budget includes the 1 million shortfall, or it would be 1,449,000 if
Yes.
that preliminary number is accurate?
Yes, yeah, sorry, thank you for making that clarification. So the 449,000 assumes that the new growth that's proposed in the mayor's budget materializes, that the state confirms that that new growth is actually there. But to the extent that it's any lower than that, I believe it's 1.3 million that's in the mayor's recommended budget. To the extent that it's any lower than that, you would add that amount to the net that you would have to balance. But because that amount isn't final yet, I hesitated putting it in, and making you go through the trauma if it ends up working out fine. So.
Jen, I didn't understand one thing. So let's say we are short $1.4 million. Then our next route to not be short is looking once again to what we've straw polled as yeses and probably straw poll again just to make sure that we can afford things, or are we going to look into our reserves?
That I think that's a discussion for the council, and I think in discussions with the either or both could be options. And I think that later on in the council meeting, the council will discuss that in more detail.
Okay.
And maybe I
Go
could
ahead.
just add a little bit. We kind of mentioned this to you in your last meeting, that a couple of possible places would be in your line item that you set aside for CIP, the additional CIP money. Absolutely, we know everyone wants that, but it is where your most flexibility is, and you would still be putting in quite a bit to CIP. This wouldn't take it down below what the mayor was suggesting. This would just be a little less than you had hoped. And another one is that holding account for alternate delivery for things that are not directly police assignments, but the police have been put in the position of doing those. That's trickier, Jennifer reminded me, because it's funding our future money. So it's a lot easier to look at a large account for a balancing opportunity. And that way, if there's extra money, it can just flow into that account. Or if there's short money, it can come out of that account. And that's how most cities balance their budgets anyway. We're, as Salt Lake City, more precise because we have the ability usually to be. But this is not unusual for other cities, and it can be done. And it's, I'm just going to say, easier to balance using one of the big accounts rather, because you've expressed your policy positions and your budget positions. If you want to go back and revisit, you certainly can, but you're not at the scale of shortfall that's essential. Is that fair, Jennifer? Is that?
Yep.
Did I make that up?
So without going further into the balancing conversation until later, and I think when hopefully Councilmember Wharton can join that part, where we discussed with the chair is that we can hopefully go through with the council some of the contingent appropriation language and the legislative intents to kind of get a final okay. Those will appear in your packets this weekend. And so we just wanted to make sure that we have captured everything that you were thinking in terms of both contingent appropriations and legislative intents. So rather than share the screen and have you have to read on the screen or me reading them, I'm just going to read the shorthand titles. And if everyone has their staff report pulled up, this is on the bottom of page 1. So we'll start going through the, excuse me, the contingent appropriation. And these would appear in the actual budget adoption ordinance themselves. And so that's why they're especially important to get right. So the first item is the diversification of public safety response. This is the holding account Cindy was referencing earlier, that the council has gathered up funds from Funding Our Future to set aside for a broader definition of public safety and a diversified response model for different types of emergencies. I'll let the council read that one and let me know if you have thoughts or edits.
Council members, thoughts or edits on that one? Okay, Jen?
Okay, and maybe I should back up really quickly, especially for newer council members, the concept of a contingent appropriation. This is language we put in the ordinance that funds are not released to be spent until certain conditions are met. And so that's why we call them contingent appropriations. And we have to be very precise in the language because the administration has to know when conditions have been met in order to release the dollars. And in some cases, even ask the council to determine when conditions have been met. So that's just to generally explain what contingent appropriation is. The next item, I'll actually skip because we're planning on emailing revised language to you guys about a conditional appropriation about current and future dollars spent on foothill trails. And we'll have both a contingent appropriation and a legislative intent for this line item. So we will text you when we send that to you and make sure that you have the ability to send us your thoughts before it goes into packets this weekend. But it will be in the public information for this weekend. Are there any questions on that one? Okay. Next item is a conditional appropriation, a general conditional appropriation for the amount of ARPA dollars, or American Rescue Plan Act dollars that have not yet been spent. This is mostly due to a few of the proposals in the mayor's recommended budget not being eligible for ARPA dollars. And so this puts those dollars into a holding account with the goal that the administration tailors recommendations with the final Treasury guidance that comes out, expected to be mid-July, and that the council will consider that in the first budget amendment. Are there any questions on that? Okay. The next one is actually a continued contingency. And the first year we did Funding Our Future, the first year the council implemented the Funding Our Future sales tax revenue. These are all items that were very important to the council at the time to make sure that those funds were tracked separately and were as transparent as possible. And as we pointed out at the time, in order for that contingency to continue, in order for those transparency requirements to continue, the council needs to adopt that contingency each year. And so we just listed again, the council can of course change that contingency each year, but it's been pretty consistent the last few years. Any questions on that? Nope. Okay. The next item is a new one from last poll discussion. This is a contingent appropriation about the construction mitigation for small business support. It allocates $200,000, but sets forward the expectation and hope that some of the funds could be reimbursed with federal grant dollars. What it does is it allows these funds to be spent, at least $100,000 worth of these funds to be spent on July 1st if there are construction projects going on immediately. Are there any questions on that? Okay, great, flying. Legislative intents, an update to the boarded building fee to reflect full costs of city monitoring.
That was requested, I think, by Councilmember Mono, so that the police and fire, the vast resources that are spent on dealing with the boarded buildings can be taken into account. Is that correct, Councilmember? Okay.
Okay. Sorry. The next item is an evaluation of the trips to transit program with the intent that it expand service areas. Okay. The next is a legislative intent on the golf fund, and this was an attempt to bring forward and roll in some of the previous year's legislative intents with what we know now. Okay. The next item is expanding the definition for funding our future for the public safety category. The council has done this a few times in the past to include fire and dispatch, but given the holding account for even further diversified models for public safety, wanting to reflect that in the funding our future communication materials. Okay. The next is public lands maintenance, and this has appeared a few times. Versions of this have appeared a few times, and that's to ask public lands to put together a full cost estimate of what it takes to maintain city lands. Okay. The next item, staff actually realized make more sense to probably include during the CIP discussion. So we will not include that one in the annual budget adoption, but you'll be discussing it in conjunction with CIP. And then the last item we will email you later is a legislative intent relating to the Foothill Trails issue. And like I said before, that will be coupled with a contingent appropriation. So the contingent appropriation will mean that no funds are released until those contingencies are met. And then the legislative intent can set forth a little bit more of the like policy goals and aspirations of the council. And I see Councilmember Horton just joined. That's great. Oh, Councilmember Romano, did you have a question?
Yeah, back to the small business support one. Would it be, I mean, does saying major road projects unnecessarily limit it? Because like if there was a tracks project or something.
Right.
We don't fund tracks projects, I guess, but a trail project or something?
So we realized that this is the item that we're actually pulling and not adopting in conjunction with the annual budget, because for exactly that reason, that you may be able to get more specific about it if you have the exact capital projects in front of you. And what we think rolled into it is the contingent appropriation for all major capital projects, that $100,000 be available to projects this year. So not having an exact clear picture of how that could be implemented in the current year, it felt like that made more sense to approach it that way this year. And Councilmember Wharton, before you joined, I mentioned that we will be emailing the council detailed language for both a contingent appropriation and a legislative intent for foothill trails. And our hope is that we can get feedback from you guys before packets go out this weekend so that it can be part of the adoption documents. And that, I know this is not an RDA meeting, but we wanted to make sure that you took a look at the RDA related legislative intents, as those will also be in the budget adoption documents for the RDA on Tuesday. And if you contact staff and let us know if this language doesn't reflect your understanding, we're happy to adjust. Okay, and that's it, Madam Chair. I think that brings us to the conversation of balancing. And if the council wants to identify a specific way that you want to handle either a deficit or a surplus.
Council members, James.
Madam Chair, I'd use that surplus money where we talk about on the CIP and just roll the 600 north traffic east-west connector that we're looking at doing into CIP, because it really is a CIP project. I think that should cover a lot of it, if not, Jennifer, most of it. Is that correct?
Yeah, so if you counted that 6 North project towards CIP, you would only need to add another $1 million to CIP to get to that 7%, which gives you about $1.7 million, cushion, if you will, if you wanted to consider that line item. And it would leave $1 million extra in that account.
That would be my suggestion, as it's an easy fix. And it is a CIP project. It's been to the community for several years. It was community driven. So that would be my suggestion.
I think that sounds like a straw poll. Is there discussion on this? Well, show your feelings, kids. This is going to be easier than I thought. I'm a yes. Dan's a yes. Chris is a yes. Darren is a yes. Dennis is a yes. James is a yes. Anna is a yes. So we'll leave $1 million in and take the rest and put it to balance the budget and give us a cushion in case that property tax comes back.
And of course, we'll let the council know if the property tax information, as soon as we get that property tax information. So
perfect.
Hopefully that will be soon.
Perfect. I think, is that everything, Jen?
I think so.
Holy
I'm a little nervous that it's such a short conversation, but great job, guys.
I know, I'm really nervous. That's why I'm asking. I'm like, wait, somebody's gonna say something here in a minute. I do
Let's take a
think
15-minute break. Let's take a 15-minute break so we can figure out something to discuss in another hour or two.
Dan, you shut your mouth.
There is the council is going into a closed session, so.
We are going into a closed session.
I attribute it, Madam Chair, to Dukes being in a different spot. It threw me off, and I think it's throwing everybody off. So appreciate it.
I think he's I think I could be wrong, but I think he's in the building. Is that a cubicle I see?
I will not confirm nor deny.
Okay, council members, we don't have anything else on our agenda except entering into a closed session. I need Katie to remind me what the purpose of the closed session would be.
For advice of counsel, unless she's popping on. It's advice of counsel and reasonably or pending litigation.
And could
That's
you
right.
add labor negotiation in case anyone has any questions about that? And this
Okay.
might be the world's shortest session. We're not sure.
So I would look for a motion to enter into closed session for purposes of advice of counsel eminent pending litigation, and labor negotiations.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Ferris, a second by Councilmember Valdemoros. I will roll call this. So, Councilmember Rogers,
Yes.
Councilmember Valdemoros,
Yes.
Councilmember Wharton,
Yes.
Councilmember Ferris,
Yes.
Councilmember Dugan,
Yes.
Councilmember Mono.
Yes.
And I am a yes, so we will get into closed session. Everybody just stay on this link. We're using this link and kicking everybody else out and locking the meeting, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes, and several administrative people, they know who they are, would be staying.
Yes. It's sort of like when we're in person. And it's like, I don't know who's supposed to stay, but you all know who's supposed to stay or go. So when it's ready and everyone feels comfortable, we'll lock it and get started on our closed session.
I can't believe we're done with that budget discussion.
I can't either.
I'm sorry to interrupt. This is Cindy Lou. I just want to confirm that you'll be closing your work session meeting after the closed session. Yes, thank you.
Should we keep it open just in case? Oh, well, no, I guess that affects SLC TV and everyone. Never mind.
Have we sent an invitation to Mark Cottrell to join us? I'm sorry, I might have overlooked it.
I texted him, but I don't know if he normally gets a panelist invite.
Can someone do that for us?
I will send an invitation to Mark Cottrell right now.
Thank you, Amanda. I'm sorry, I should have asked that earlier.
No worries.
And I'll just tell you the reason I said this could be short is I don't know if things are ready to talk about. So once you're in a closed session, we can find that out. You puzzled us by being so quick.
Can I take credit for that since I'm the major variable that changed here?
Sure thing.
Anybody who wants to gets to take credit.